When he doesn't answer the way you expect, what if God's silence is not a closed door? What if it is an invitation to come closer? There are moments when you pray and you expect something to happen. You expect a sign, a clear direction, an immediate answer. But nothing changes. The phone doesn't ring. The opportunity doesn't appear. The situation remains exactly where it was. And after a while, you begin asking a painful question. God, why aren't you saying anything? But perhaps the deeper question is, what is God teaching me in the quiet? Because sometimes God allows silence to remove the noise around you. When everything is loud, you can become dependent on constant reassurance. You want to know what happens next? You want to know how everything will work out. You want certainty before you move. But faith doesn't always give you certainty. Sometimes faith gives you peace without explanations. Psalm 46:10 says, "Be still and know that I am God." Notice the order. Be still, then know, not the other way around. Sometimes we keep searching for answers when God is first asking us to become still. Still enough to stop rehearsing every possibility. Still enough to stop carrying tomorrow before it arrives. Still enough to remember God is still God, even when your circumstances are confusing. Maybe you have been trying to figure out everything by yourself. You replay conversations. You analyze decisions. You wonder what you should have done differently. You imagine every possible future. And somehow, the more you think, the less peace you have. But there comes a moment when faith says, "Lord, I have thought about this enough. I have worried about this enough. Now, I place it in your hands." That is not weakness. That is surrender. And surrender is one of the deepest forms of trust. Jesus demonstrated this kind of trust. In the Garden of Gethsemane, he faced a moment of immense difficulty, yet his prayer was ultimately about surrendering his will to the Father. That teaches us something important. Faith is not pretending that everything feels easy. Faith is choosing God, even when obedience is difficult. And perhaps your silent season is revealing something inside you, not because God wants to punish you, but because he wants you to discover where your trust really rests. Do you trust God only when he gives you answers? Or can you trust him when all you have is his presence? That is where faith becomes deeper, because eventually you realize something beautiful. You don't need to understand every chapter to trust the author. You don't need to know every step to know who is walking with you. You don't need tomorrow's explanation to receive today's grace. So if God feels quiet right now, don't immediately assume that something is wrong. Take a breath, pray, be still, and remember, your faith is not measured by how loudly God speaks. Sometimes your faith is revealed by how peacefully you remain when he is quiet. And maybe this silence is not the end of your story. Maybe it is where your relationship with God is becoming deeper than ever before. Stay with him, even in the quiet. What God can build in the quiet. Maybe you have reached a point where you are tired of asking for answers. Not because you have stopped believing, but because you have been carrying the same question for so long. You prayed about it. You surrendered it. You prayed again. And still, nothing seems clear. But what if God is doing something deeper than giving you an answer? What if he is building something inside you that an answer alone could never produce? Sometimes God changes our perspective before he changes our circumstances. and that can be uncomfortable because we naturally want God to remove the pressure. But God may first teach us how to remain steady under pressure. Think about David. Before he became king, there was a long period of uncertainty. He had already been chosen, but he still had to walk through difficult years before he saw the promise fulfilled. The promise was real, even when the circumstances did not look like it. And that is something you need to remember. A delay in what you see does not automatically mean a denial from God. There are things God may be developing in you that you would never develop in a comfortable season. Patience, discernment, compassion, humility, courage, a deeper dependence on prayer. These qualities often grow quietly. Nobody applauds them. Nobody sees the internal battle. Nobody knows how many times you chose peace instead of bitterness. Nobody knows how many times you could have complained but chose to thank God instead. But God sees it, and perhaps that is what matters most. Your silent season may be teaching you to stop measuring God's faithfulness by visible results. Because if your only evidence is what you can see, your faith will constantly rise and fall with circumstances. One good day, you feel hopeful. One difficult day, you feel forgotten. One answered prayer, you feel close to God. One unanswered prayer, you wonder where He went. But mature faith begins to say, my circumstances can change, but God's character does not. Hebrews 13:8 reminds us that Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. That means your confidence does not have to depend on what today looks like. You can have questions and still have faith. You can feel disappointed and still trust God. You can admit that you are tired without believing that God has abandoned you. This is important because sometimes we think having faith means never feeling uncertain. It doesn't. Faith means bringing your uncertainty to God instead of allowing uncertainty to pull you away from Him. So if you are in a quiet season right now, stop demanding that you understand everything immediately. Ask a different prayer. Lord, show me what you want to develop in me. Teach me what I need to learn. Give me wisdom for today, instead of asking for a complete map of tomorrow, because God may not reveal the entire path, but He can give you enough grace for the next step. And that next step matters. You don't have to solve your entire future tonight. You don't have to understand every unanswered question. You simply have to remain faithful with what God has placed in front of you today. Maybe the silence is teaching you that God is worthy of your trust, not only when He explains Himself, but also when He asks you to wait. And one day, you may realize that the greatest thing you received from that quiet season was not the answer you were asking for. It was the faith you developed while waiting for it. Because sometimes God doesn't use silence to keep you from Him. He uses silence to draw you deeper into Him. Trusting God when you still don't know, there comes a point in every believer's life when faith has to become more than a feeling. You may still have questions. You may still not understand the timing. You may still wish God would make everything clearer. But something inside you begins to change. You stop saying, God, give me every answer. And you begin saying, God, wherever you lead me, I will trust you. That is a different kind of faith. It is not based on having everything figured out. It is based on knowing who God is. Think about Abraham. God called him to go before he knew exactly where the journey would lead. He had to move forward without having the entire picture. That is what faith often looks like. Not knowing everything, but trusting the one who does. Maybe that is what God is asking from you right now. Not to understand your entire future, not to predict what will happen next, not to force an answer. Just trust Him with today. Trust Him with the conversation you cannot control. Trust Him with the relationship you cannot fix by yourself. Trust Him with the decision you are afraid to make. Trust Him with the future you cannot see. And most importantly, trust Him with the parts of your life you desperately want to control. Because sometimes our greatest struggle is not God's silence. It is our desire to control what the silence means. We assume the worst. We create stories in our minds. We convince ourselves that nothing will change. But you don't know what God is doing tomorrow. You only know what you see today. And today is not the whole story. Isaiah 55:8-9 reminds us that God's thoughts and ways are higher than ours. That means there will always be moments when His plan makes no sense to us. And that is okay. You were never asked to understand God completely. You were asked to trust Him. So if you are walking through a quiet season, don't let the silence convince you that your prayers are meaningless. Keep talking to God. Keep opening His Word. Keep choosing forgiveness. Keep choosing gratitude. Keep doing what is right, even when nobody seems to notice. Because your faith is being formed not only in the moments when God answers loudly, but also in the moments when you quietly remain faithful. And perhaps one day you will look back and realize the silence changed you. It made your prayers deeper. It made your heart softer. It taught you patience. It taught you to listen. It taught you that God's presence is not dependent on your emotions. And maybe that is the blessing hidden inside this season. You wanted an explanation. God was building trust. You wanted immediate change. God was developing endurance. You wanted certainty. God was teaching you dependence. So don't despise the quiet. Let it draw you closer. Let it teach you. Let it strengthen you. And when you don't know what to do next, take the next faithful step, then another, and another. You may not hear a dramatic voice from heaven. You may not receive the perfect sign, but you can still walk with God, because faith does not always grow through what God says. Sometimes faith grows through what you learn when God seems silent. So tonight, if you are carrying an unanswered prayer, give it back to God. Not because you stopped caring, but because you trust Him more than you trust your own understanding. And say, Lord, I may not understand your silence, but I will not mistake it for your absence. Your story is still being written. Your future is still in His hands. And this quiet season does not have the final word. God does. If this message spoke to your heart, comment AMN below. Share this with someone who may be walking through a quiet season, and subscribe for more faith-filled messages. Keep trusting, keep praying, and keep walking with God, even when the road is quiet, because sometimes the silence is where faith becomes strongest.